for the recording. Thank you. You know, at the end when Musa'ib is done, and there's dua, can you keep the recording and the live stream going to the very end of dua?
Okay.
Because people who are watching online, they say that the gham is being cut and the dua is being cut. Can you carry on playing live stream until the end, right to the end? Thank you. Thanks. For the love of the companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, one loud sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعن الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوحا والذي أوحينا إليك وما وصينا به إبراهيم وموسى وعيسى أن أقيموا الدين ولا تتفرقوا فيه آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Hujjah, my respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our commentary on Ziyarat al-Waritha has reached our discussion on Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyillah, whereby we salute the master of the martyrs, Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, as addressing him by saying, peace and blessings be upon you, O inheritor of Nuh, the great prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And 2 nights ago, we spoke about the necessity of engaging with the prophetic stories and retrieving lessons from them and applying them into our lives. And yesterday we looked at the story and the relationship between Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and Prophet Adam alayhi salam. And we stated that principally, Prophet Adam alayhi salam represented the archetype of human potential, in that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was asked by the angels, why do you wish to create this caliph on earth? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know about this creation what you know not. I know about the potentiality of this creation. I know what it can achieve physically and spiritually. In that everything that is created within this universe, the only creature that can truly fathom it, the only creature that can truly engage and conquer it and utilize it for the means and purposes which I have created it for, is this Adam, meaning you and I. Thus we are the archetype for that intellectual and spiritual endeavor. And thus, on the 10th of Muharram, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam showed and demonstrated how he was the great archetype for human capacity, human potential, human endeavor, in that despite being under the gravest of circumstances, physically, emotionally, mentally, despite all of these trials and tribulations befalling upon him in one afternoon, yet he could stand as the peak of humanity and demonstrate that humanity that was found within his heart. And we highlighted that famous narration that came on the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram, when he's faced with all of the 30,000 enemy swords. And despite this, he cried on their behalf, wishing that they would not do what they would do for the sake of saving them from the hellfire. What a human being. What a grand individual that would still consider their circumstances in those final moments of his own life. And thus we realize what Adam, us, you and I, can achieve within our hearts. If we only look at these two individuals, Prophet Adam alayhi salam and Aba Abdullah alayhi salam, we realize the human potential that we have. And thus we question, what is it that I will do with the few years that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to me on this planet? What will I achieve within the time frame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed for me to live and breathe amongst the rest of my human brethren? And thus we come tonight to Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyullah. Peace and blessings be upon you, O inheritor of Prophet Nuh, the great prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam probably can be divided into two. And the first is the pre-flood, and the second is the flood itself. Because of course, the story of Nuh alayhi salam is a very famous one that many other faiths believe in, all sects uphold. And when you look at the story, it's primarily divided into what Prophet Nuh alayhi salam did by virtue of him calling people. For 950 years, how he called them, why he called them, the way in which he called them. And ultimately, the flood itself. Now the flood, we will come to, but it represents its own thing in history of humanity. And the calling of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam represents something specific within the history of humanity. The story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, for many of us, is a story with very little value, because it is gone thousands of years ago. And we think, okay, Prophet called, 950 years passed, at the end of it, he chiseled together his ark, and he brought people and animals onto this ark, and then the floods came, it destroyed people, and that was the end of it. Maybe we debate things like, well, where did the ark arrive at? Maybe it arrived in Turkey, maybe it arrived on Mount Judy. What was the sign that was imprinted on the side of it? It had the names of Ahlul Bayt, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. The problem is, we confine our knowledge of this story to this particular realm. What more do we know about it? What more do we think about it as a means of humanity? And again, we highlight that this is where we fall short in terms of our retrieving the lessons from the stories of the prophetic envoys. There is a very famous Canadian professor of Islamic history by the name of Professor Todd Lawson. Professor Lawson has produced fantastic works that many of us can go onto Google and retrieve and research and read. Amongst them, he has a wonderful analysis of the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. In there, he has a line which is phenomenal. He has a line, a single statement, which in this particular statement begins for us to realize the value of prophets and their particular stories in our lifetimes. And thus we connect this to Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyullah. Professor Lawson states that the rise and fall of civilizations have been based upon the prophetic envoy to that particular civilization. Meaning, the success and failure of history, all civilizations throughout history, has always been based upon how they interacted with their prophetic envoys. When civilizations listened to their prophetic envoys, they always flourished. When they took the message, they flourished. When they objected and rejected the prophetic envoy, they were destroyed. We know this in history. But it's a beautiful observation as to the way Professor Lawson has stated it. That when I observe prophetic history, the reality is the success and failure is based upon how I interact with those particular prophets. In the same way, our success and failure is whether I reject or obey the story of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. En masse, if I object to it and I side with Banu Umayyah, or I decide to uphold Yazid and say things like radiyallahu an, and I consider Yazid as being the successful one on the day, the 10th of Muharram, then of course I am alongside the enemies of the prophets. And if I am with Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, I'm on the side of the prophets, and therefore I'm guaranteed victory. Civilizations, not just individuals. The point Professor Lawson makes is, we normally consider the issue of the prophets to be very narrow, individualistic. Think of it on a broader human scale. The victory, the success, the failure of human civilizations has been as to how I interact with the prophetic envoy. Now with that in mind, I begin to see the flood of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam as something phenomenal. You see, when you look at other prophetic stories, it is normally localized to a particular town. Right? Think about the stories of Hud alayhi salam, the story of Salih alayhi salam, the story of Shu'aib alayhi salam. All of these stories are very relative to a small town. The people of Ad, one town. The people of Thamud, one town. The people of Madain, one town. The difference between Nuh alayhi salam and these other prophets is that Prophet Nuh's story is a story not for a town, not for a country, an entire region. When the flood came, an entire region was decimated. The floods took place to the extent that an entire region of Asia, reaching from one point of Asia to the next point of Asia, was decimated. Meaning that Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, his call was also regionalized. Meaning that this envoy that reached people wasn't small. It was going out to a part of the entire globe. Now yesterday when we talked about Adam alayhi salam, we said keep certain things in mind, right? We said don't consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create haphazardly. Everything is purpose-based. We told you, inshallah, keep this in mind. We're going to come to it. The same thing, keep in mind that the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam is a regional-based story. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy tens of thousands of square miles and kilometers of land, it must mean for Him to be a just Lord, it must have been a story for 950 years that had reached all of those same places as well. Now when we go to the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, the first thing we find is, his story is encapsulated in one entire chapter of the Holy Quran. Does anyone know which chapter number? Chapter number 71. In the entire chapter of 71, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala names the whole story, the story of Nuh, the chapter of Nuh. Elsewhere in the Holy Quran, chapter number 11, chapter number 26, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes other facets of the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. If I want to read on Nuh tonight, when I go home, read the chapters, number 71, read number 11, read number 26, and I will get a complete picture of the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Elsewhere, the second thing is, the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam had an impact on other people outside of the people of Nuh alayhi salam. What do I mean? You find in Surah Ghafir, chapter number 40 of the Holy Quran, it narrates a story of an individual by the name of Mu'min min Banu Israel. Mu'min min Banu Israel. There was a believer from amongst Banu Israel that hid his faith in a state of taqiyya, whereby even though he was close to the leadership of Banu Israel, Fir'aun and the chiefs of Fir'aun, he used to pretend to be one of them. When the story of Musa alayhi salam came, and when Musa alayhi salam began to preach to them, he decided to come out of his taqiyya and decided to point at the truth of Musa alayhi salam. The way in which he proves Musa alayhi salam was through Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Meaning that the story of Prophet Nuh had an impact on him. It impacted him to the extent that he used it as a means to disprove Fir'aun. What did he say? He stood to Banu Israel and said to them, think about it. If this man, Musa alayhi salam, if this man is lying about his one God, the punishment will be on him. But if he is telling the truth about there being this one God named Allah, then the punishment will be on you for not believing in him. Meaning, why are you chastising him? Why are you sending him away blindly? Think about what he is saying. Ultimately, either the punishment will fall on him or it will fall on you. If it falls on him, it doesn't matter. Let him preach as much as he wants to preach. But if he's telling an ounce of truth and you don't follow it, the punishment will fall upon you and I. You see, here, at this point, he hadn't broken his taqiyya. All he was doing was speaking very logically to them. Think about the message that is reaching you. He continues on as to how he preaches to Banu Israel. He says to them, Inni akhafu alaykum mithli yawm al-ahzab. I fear for you the same punishments that will fall upon the people of Ahzab. And mithli da'bi Nuhan wa Adan wa Thamudan. I fear that a punishment will fall upon you as grave as the punishment that fell upon the Qawm of Nuh alayhi salam. The first thing is, the story of Nuh alayhi salam had impacted him to the extent that it made him a God-fearing person. He wasn't passive. I've heard of the stories of Nuh, Ad and Thamud. Fine, and what? No. It impacted him whereby he was fearful of the same thing happening. 1. 2, he used it against the people of Fir'aun and saying, you are aware of the story of Nuh. Why are you forgetting the story of Nuh? You remember 2 nights ago, we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals 25 prophetic stories. Why? Because if there was a 26th, people wouldn't have known about these names, so they would have rejected. The people of Fir'aun couldn't reject the story of Nuh alayhi salam because they already knew about the story of Nuh alayhi salam. It was within their books, their scriptures, their storytellers, their tales, their fables. And so he says, I fear for you the story of Nuh and the same punishment that befalls upon you, that befell upon Nuh. Now remember, what did we say geographically? The story of Nuh alayhi salam was a story that hadn't necessarily reached, the flood hadn't necessarily reached the people of Egypt. It happened in Asia, it didn't reach the people of Africa. It went from Asia, India, it went towards the Arabian lands, the floods decimated all the way into land as Turkey, into that part of modern day Europe. But it hadn't reached the southern sides of the world, yet they had known about the punishment that had befallen upon the people of Nuh. I fear for you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you such a punishment that He may destroy your region entirely. Subhanallah, He is this fearful of the people. This proves to us that the story of Nuh alayhi salam was a wide-reaching story, was one that impacted an individual, that made him profess this story to other people. In chapter number 71, the story of Nuh alayhi salam is a beautiful one. The first thing we realize is that each prophet spoke to their people in accordance with the language in which they spoke. This is proven in the Holy Quran in chapter number 14, 1-4, verse number 4. Again, often I say to you, take away something specific from this majlis, don't I? Take this verse home with you tonight. 14:4. Chapter 14 is Surah Ibrahim. Take away chapter 14:4, because this is the principle of what we're going to talk about tonight, inshallah. In verse 14:4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, each prophet speaks to their people in accordance with the language in which they speak. Now here, this lisan is tongue. It doesn't mean literal language. It doesn't mean Aramaic. It doesn't mean Hebrew, Arabic, Farsi, French. It doesn't mean language. It means culture. It means way of thought. How do we prove this? Simple. When we teach our youth in madrasa and we teach them the basics of the stories of the prophets, we say to them, Musa alayhi salam came to Banu Israel and spoke to them in their language. Which language? They used to deal with miracles. Hence, Musa alayhi salam battled the magicians. The magicians came forth, they threw their stick, Musa alayhi salam threw his stick, and it swallowed up theirs. Isa alayhi salam came, he spoke to them in the language of medicines. They were great doctors. Thus, Isa alayhi salam cured the sick, cured the blind, cured the leper. This astounded them because the top doctors were overcome by the top doctor of the time. In the same way, when Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came, they were poets, weren't they? Poets. They used to have annual competitions and write great poetry and hang it on the door of the Kaaba. Whoever was the greatest poet that year got his poet published for the whole year on the door of the Kaaba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a miracle that was so superior to their language. They were overcome by the language. One story, one individual says that the people of Makkah, the people of Quraysh, they were so against Rasulullah. And this year, when I came for Hajj, he was an outsider. When I came for Hajj, I prepared to engage in this year's annual competition of poetic speaking. He says, but when I came to the Quraysh, they said, be wary of a poet and a magician by the name of Muhammad. His poetry is so magical that he will put a spell upon you and convert you to his religion. So do you know what I used to do? When I would perform tawaf of Kaaba, in order to stop hearing the verses of this man Muhammad, I used to put cotton wool in my ears. I used to put cotton wool in my ears. And I would perform tawaf so that I didn't listen to the verses revealed from this man Muhammad. As I was performing tawaf, it struck me. What a stupid thing I'm doing. I mean, really, I am the master poet. I should want to hear this man's lines. At the very least, at least let me hear what he has to say. And so I took out my cotton wool and I began to listen to what Rasulullah was saying. And it became so enamored in my heart. I began to love it and fall in love with it. As I saw, eventually, this man, Muhammad, he left the proximity of the Kaaba and decided to go home. I decided to follow him. As I followed him, he turned round to me and said, can I help you? I said, I've been so enamored by the verses which you have been reading. I want to hear more from you. He entered into his house. I followed him. By the time I left my house, I had become a Muslim. Now here the point I want to make is that each prophet would speak in accordance with the culture, the time, the language in which they were engaged in. They would speak in a way that they could have their people understand the wider message in order for them to come towards the religion of God. In Surah Nuh, chapter number 71, Prophet Nuh alayhi salam describes the most beautiful aspects of his calling towards his own people. What does he do? Verses number 5 to 12. He describes how difficult it was for him. How many years did he have to preach? 930 50. You know what he says? He makes a complaint to his Lord. You know, sometimes when we do da'wah to our family, to our friends, to our colleagues, our university friends, sometimes we think we've got it difficult. Have you ever tried preaching for 950 years and got nowhere? Subhanallah. Look at the patience of this man. You know what he says? My Lord, I have called them during the night and during the day. I have called them openly and in public and in secret. I would go to their houses individually and I would sermonize them publicly. Do you know what they used to do? This is the Quran saying. Nuh alayhi salam saying, when I preached to them, they would put their fingers in their ears and they would put their clothes above their head and scurry away from me. Have you ever had that? Imagine, you're trying to talk about Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and at that point, have you ever imagined that someone actually puts their jumper or their coat over their head in order to walk away from you? They were so abhorred by the message of Nuh alayhi salam, they put their fingers in their ears and they covered themselves. So Nuh alayhi salam changes tact. Says, Ya Allah, now I'm calling them, warning them of your punishment and warning them and including them in your grace. You see, sometimes all we do is talk about punishment, punishment, punishment. No, there is another side to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rahmah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fadl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving to us unlimited barakat. Sometimes we need to show the other side of how we're preaching. Do you know what Nuh alayhi salam says? And this is very important to what I'm trying to get to. Nuh in the Holy Quran in verse number 12, he talks about what he says to them. He says, my Lord, when I called them, I told them that if they were to follow you, they could have great wealth, they could have great families, they could have great rivers and gardens flowing amongst themselves. Now here, the lazy reading of this verse would think that he's talking about akhirah. They could have gardens and rivers. This is paradise. No, it's not paradise. It's not paradise. It's dunya he's talking about. How do we know this? Because he says you can have wealth and sons. Are wealth and sons found in akhirah? No, they're not. Are you going to have 5 children in akhirah? No, you're not. Meaning that the way in which he preached to them was talking about the benefits religion can have for them within dunya. You can have great wealth. Islam doesn't say don't earn. It says earn. Earn and give back to the community. It says you can have great family. You know, sometimes because we haven't understood religion, we have family disputes that are very petty. The reality is, as a family unit, we shouldn't be having those disputes. You can have great sons, great daughters. We can bring them up in the family, he says. He says you can have rivers and gardens flowing amongst yourselves. What does this mean? Think about it. When Prophet Nuh alayhi salam came to his community, what kind of community were they? They were farmers. They were basic engineers, weren't they? Because the ark wasn't new to them. They didn't say, what's this contraption you're building? We've never seen such a thing. They said, are you building an ark when the sea is so far away? They knew what an ark was. They didn't realize the flood was coming. So they were farmers. They had irrigation. They needed rivers. They needed streams. They needed estuaries. Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was saying to his community, if you are God-fearing people and apply religion, A, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you barakat within this dunya, and B, you will live a life which is a wholesome life within this dunya. You see, those petty things that you have within your life, those problems that you have within your life, I can take them away from you. You can live a rich and fulfilling life. This is so important for us in the 21st century. Why? Because sometimes we find that there are 2 types of Muslims or 2 types of Shia. The type of Muslim that there is divided into two sometimes. There is the holistic Muslim, and then there's the Shahr Ramadan Muslim. True or not? True or not? There is the Muslim for the whole year, that his entire life is governed by Islam. His business ethics are governed by Islam. The family inside the house is governed by Islam. When he travels on an airplane, it's governed by Islam. When he goes on holiday, it's governed by Islam. And then there's the Shahr Ramadan Muslim. At that time, all the Muslims come out, mashallah. At that time, everyone's fasting, everyone's super religious. Within the Shia, we have the same issue. There is the Muslim, and there's the Shia. The Shia culture is, you have the Shia, and you have the Muharram Shia. The Muslim is the Shahr Ramadan Muslim or the Muslim. The Shia is the Muharram Shia or the entire Shia. The one who lives his life in accordance with Quran and Ahlul Bayt. And then there's the Muharram one. I come because the culture demands I come. I come because if I don't come, my family will be asked, where is Ali? I haven't seen him on the 7th of Muharram. Where is Hussain? I didn't see him in the Ma'tam. I didn't see him in the Julus. It'll be an embarrassment for the family. The reality is the embarrassment was that he didn't come the rest of the Thursdays during the whole month, during the whole year, during the rest of his life. In this way, religion has become compartmentalized. It's become partial. I find religion in the masjid. I don't find religion in the house. I find religion in the masjid. I don't find it in my ethics as to how I deal with the outside world. Nuh alayhi salam was trying to say that this religion encompasses your entirety of your life. What did he say in verse 12? This religion can impact your wealth, your family, your rivers, your estuaries, your gardens. Meaning, your entirety of your life will be made better by the religion. It won't be made worse by the religion. You can have everything and more. It won't limit you. This is the religion that needs to be preached to people today. Because what we end up making religion is compartmentalized. We end up saying, this religion does good for your akhirah. No. We stated to you, if the religion is not found here in dunya, you will not find it in akhirah. We shouldn't be talking just about akhirah. It is how the religion makes you a wholesome human being here in this world. It makes you righteous. It makes you successful. It doesn't curtail you in any way. It doesn't say, don't become the wealthiest man in the world. No problem. You want to be Bill Gates? Go and be Bill Gates. Alhamdulillah. Achieve. But achieve in the light of God. Achieve. Nuh alayhi salam, his preaching wasn't understood. They thought that he was trying to take them away from opportunity, as opposed to making them realize, no, this is the reality of the entirety of your life. Their response, they put their fingers in their ears, they covered their heads with their cloaks, and they walked on by. The outcome was, these people were so blind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to destroy them. Had to destroy them for their own benefit, because they were living a life which was so bad, to continue living it was only going to add to their destruction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was being merciful to that sense of destruction. Let me take you now, instead. How do we know this? From a line in one of the greatest of du'as that we recite on the night of Qadr in Shahr Ramadan. In Du'a Makarimul Akhlaq. Our fourth Imam, Zayn al-Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, states, my Lord, if my life becomes a playground for Satan, if my soul has been taken over by Iblis, call me back to you before he makes my life so bad. I would rather die or be destroyed by Allah when I haven't been overrun by Iblis. It would be better for me, wouldn't it? To be returned back into the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to change an entire region. you have arrived at a point of such darkness within your own soul, it's better I call you back now, because there's nothing for you to live for within this world. You see, people question, and they say, Nuh, he called for destruction upon his people. He did, because it was better for them. Imagine being so dark-hearted. Now here, we can show this through another analysis of the verse of Quran. Phenomenal. This time, in Surah Al-Hud, as we stated, Surah Al-Hud also describes the story of Nuh alayhi salam. There's a verse that is phenomenal, and this verse and the entire flood is the verse how we understand As-salamu alayka ya Waritha, Nuh Nabiyullah. The verse states, Nuh alayhi salam engages with the people, specifically the chiefs. Now when it says the chiefs of the people of Nuh, it means those people who are in authority. You know, in a community, there is always people who are in authority, correct? There are those people, either they are the rich, they are the famous, they have a good family name, they are strong, they are knowledgeable. All these different factors make up authority within a community. The president, the elders, there's always a community dynamic that makes up the structure of a society. And so, Nuh alayhi salam goes towards his community and engages with them. The chiefs respond back to him, and they respond by saying, "Oh Nuh, we don't want to follow your religion." You know why? Because you've only been able to attract the poor people from your community. The slaves. You know, we make judgments. The castes. There's people who are higher and people who are lower. We have culture. This person is Khoja, Pakistani, Iraqi, Irani, Sayyid, non-Sayyid. We make distinguishments, don't we, for some reason. And even in the Hindu system, there's a caste system, isn't there? There's a hierarchy. For some reason, we have entered this into the Muslim society. This isn't found within society. This isn't found within Islam. This is extraneous towards Islam. We have added it where it's not actually in. Of course, the Sadat have a position jurisprudentially as to how khumus and sadaqat are dealt with. That's a separate conversation. In the societal structure, we are all equal. Inna akramakum indallah atqakum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, people are only distinguished based upon their taqwa. Simple. That's the only distinguishing feature that we have. The people, the leadership of Nuh alayhi salam judged the people who came towards Nuh alayhi salam based upon their caste systems. I'm sorry Nuh, you have taken the poor, you have taken the wretched, you've taken the blacks, you've taken the whites, you've taken this, you've taken that. We, the rich and powerful, don't want to make a change because the message that you have is only appealing to the people we find who are the low people within the community. Now think about it. Is that the way a community is supposed to be? Are we supposed to be divisive, or are we supposed to be entirely inclusive? Is the message supposed to be for everyone, or is the message supposed to be for individuals? Is the message supposed to be for individuals? Only our culture, our caste, our creed, our sect, our accepts the religion? Or is it supposed to be for everyone? It's supposed to be for everyone, correct? The problem is, those individuals didn't find a reason to come towards the religion because they understood it in a problematic way. It didn't appeal to them because the way they understood it was that this religion is only appealing to this sect, this group, this caste of people. Therefore, we reject the religion because it's not for us. The way in which they understood it was wrong, not the way in which Nuh alayhi salam was preaching it to be wrong. So they rejected it. Nuh alayhi salam responds with the most phenomenal of statements. He says to them, I do not reject anyone that comes towards the religion. If you, the wealthy, the powerful, came towards the religion, I wouldn't reject you. Nor would I treat you any differently as to the poorest person, the white, the black, the Hindu, the Jew, the Sayyid, the Khoja, the Pakistani, the Irani. I wouldn't treat you any differently. You are all the same in my eyes. I love you all the same. Our problem is, we don't think like that. We haven't adopted the prophetic personality. We've adopted our personalities, which is in opposition to the prophetic personality. I divide and conquer. I divide into sectarianism. I divide into religiosity. I change and I move and I decide who I think is religious and who is worthy of my time and who's not. This is the problem. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuh Nabiyullah. Tell me, did Aba Abdullah alayhi salam distinguish who came to his religion or not? Look on the 10th of Muharram. Who came? Who came? There were black slaves that came. There were Christians that came, true or not? John. You had women. You had children. You had elderlies. He didn't reject anyone. The religion of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam was such that it was open for everyone. The only problem was that we didn't inherit the religion of Aba Abdullah. We chose to inherit parts of the religion of Aba Abdullah. We pick and choose. When Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said, Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuh Nabiyullah, was for two reasons. One, the calling in which Nuh alayhi salam went through, that it was for the whole of mankind. I don't reject anyone, the poorest of the poor. I don't reject anyone who believes. You're all for me. And the second was in regards to the flood. You see, the flood changed a region. It changed an entire global populace of people, to the extent that millions of people would have been affected by the outcome of the calling of Nuh alayhi salam. We stated Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to destroy them. The fact is, destroy, change, good, bad, the entirety of a region was changed by virtue of Nuh alayhi salam. In the same way, Aba Abdullah al-Hussain's message changed an entire region within the Ummah in 61 after Hijrah. How were they affected? Kufa was affected. Damascus was affected. Iraq was affected. Egypt was affected. Medina was affected. Baghdad was affected. Samarra was affected. Mecca was affected. Andalusia, Spain was affected. The true mission of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam was one that swept the entire nation of Islam. And hence the entire nation of Islam was able to be moved by the message of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. The story of Nuh was a flood. The story of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain is a flood as well. It is a raging torrent that changed people in 61 after Hijrah, to the extent that Yazid had to let the women of Al-Muhammad go because they had created such a tumult within the community. True or not? Why were they left? Why did they become released? The sermons of Sayyida Zainab salamullahi alayha, our fourth Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, was such that it changed the region entirely. And hence the Hussaini movement was a flood. Hence, Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuh Nabiyullah. Now here I want us to take away a message. Think about our message today, the Hussaini movement. Think about the global nature. Think about Bolivia. Think about China. Think about New Zealand. Think about Canada. And think about today how we are portraying the Hussaini message. For many of us, it's one-dimensional. It is all about the azaa we are doing, and through that we have compartmentalized our Hussaini mission into one methodology of spreading the Hussaini mission. The problem is, that although for you and I, Ma'tam, as an example, may be a way for us to engage in the Hussaini mission with respect, as an example, for the people of Bolivia, it's not. For the people of Canada, it's not. For the people of Australia, it's not. When they Google image Karbala and Hussein, and they see the first images that are being revealed, they become turned away from the Hussaini mission as opposed to being endeared and gravitate towards the Hussaini movement. Because we have compartmentalized the way in which we want to designate that flowing torrent. It was all very relative. What did I say? Take away which verse from the Holy Quran? Chapter 14, verse 4. The prophets only spoke to those people in regards to their language. Not Aramaic, not Arabic, not Farsi. The region had a culture. The region had a way in which they were attracted to a message. The prophets spoke to their people in a way in which they understood the message. Musa alayhi salam spoke at their level. Isa alayhi salam spoke at their level. Rasulullah spoke at their level. Our problem is, with the greatest universal message that can become an absolute torrent, that can become a flood throughout the whole world, we want to compartmentalize the message into one facet. That's how we become attracted. It's not necessarily how they become attracted. We have to start thinking in light of the 21st century, speak to people in terms of their language. The people of Bolivia have a certain culture, we need to speak to them in their language. The people of India have a certain culture, we speak to them in their language. If our way of presenting the Hussaini mission actually turns people away from Hussainiyat, then I'm doing a disservice to Aba Abdullah as opposed to actually being in service to Hussain ibn Ali. We have to start thinking in light of relativity. Every country is at different stages of appreciation, different stages of culture, different stages of morality, different stages of economy, different stages of politics. One shoe size does not fit all. I'm sorry, it does not. It doesn't, does it? It's very relative. And thus, for us to make the Hussaini movement that genuine flood that can encompass a region in one moment, we have to go back to the core message of Hussain ibn Ali. And you know what that was? Standing up for the oppressed against the oppressor. Because that permeates every region, every language, every era, every society. Our problem is that as Muslims, we have forgotten, and as Shia, we have forgotten the primary message of Hussain ibn Ali. We end up squabbling over what kind of azar I want to do, what kind of azar I think is right, what kind of azar I think is wrong. Where have we come to in the 21st century? We are the intellectual giants. What did we say yesterday? We're human beings that are planting nanochips into the brains of human beings. The Shia are still fighting over what kind of azadari we're supposed to do. The whole message is being lost. Why would someone in Bolivia, the average person in India, the average person in Pakistan, the average person in America be gravitating towards the message of Hussain ibn Ali when all we're doing is fighting over which language, fighting over which method of azadari I'm supposed to do? And we think, why is Imam not coming back? How backwards have we become? Really, really, how backwards have we become? We can't sit around a table and intellectually discuss these issues. We have to argue and fight and swear and shout at each other and make videos against ulama and dhakirin. He said this and I don't like that and why? The message of Imam Hussain is simple. Stand up for the oppressed against the oppressor. That is the message that needs to permeate across humanity. For humanity to be engulfed by the by the raging torrent that is the flood of Hussainiyat. Let me give to you one example, and then we'll conclude. If you understand this precious movement of the 10th of Muharram. Today, there is one state in the world which is an illegal, illegitimate state. Which is it? Israel. Israel is an illegal, illegitimate state. According to all forms of international law and morality, it doesn't deserve. It's not me being racist, it's a fact according to United Nations charters. Now, today what happens is, the innocent Palestinian Muslim stands in front of helicopter gunships, stands in front of tanks, and throws stones against it, true or not. And what happens is, bulldozers, which are half the size of this room, come and crush houses. Yes? And what happens is we stand and we march, we demonstrate, we email, we blog, we boycott their goods, and we say we're not going to engage in anything that supports the oppressor. True or not? Now, I want you to think about this question. And I want this message to reach the whole world. I want people to email this. I want people to think about this question around the world. Imagine now the circumstance was the other way around. Imagine it was the Muslim Palestinian that was murdering the innocent Jew. Think about it. That it was the Muslim with the helicopter gunship, that it was the Muslim with the tank, and it was the Jew who would throw stones and had nothing. We stand up, march, demonstrate, boycott, email on behalf of a Muslim. Why? Because he's a Muslim. What if it was the other way round? I ask you an honest question. Would you put in as much effort into stopping the Palestinian from killing the innocent Jew as you do the Jew killing the innocent Palestinian? Would you boycott the Palestinian goods? Would you march, demonstrate against them if the shoe was on the other foot? I tell you what, 99% of us wouldn't lift a finger. It's a Jew, it's an Israeli, it's a Hindu, it's a Sikh, it's an atheist. It's nothing to do with me. That proves I haven't understood the Hussaini movement one iota. I can cry as much as I want to cry. I can beat my chest as much as I want to beat my chest. But if I see oppression happening in the world, and I don't stand up against it, what difference is there between me and the Yazid? Yesterday, there was one Yazid. Today, there are 1,000 Yazids. Yesterday, there was one Hussain. We need 1,000 Hussains from amongst us today. Our problem is, we don't look at these things. We become so engulfed in trying to export our culture to our children, our culture to the rest of the world, as opposed to going back to the pure message of Hussain ibn Ali. Think about it. If I wouldn't lift a finger for that innocent Jew, then I haven't understood the first reason as to why Hussain ibn Ali set foot onto the plains of Karbala. My brothers and sisters, I want us to think deeply about this message. We can't keep on going on this way. We can't allow ourselves as a community, as a global Shia community, to continue the way in which we are, the way in which we're fighting, peddling our little petty issues against each other. On this night, rise above it and go back to the genuine core of the message. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyillah. If you want the message of Hussain ibn Ali to be a torrent, a flood that covers an entire region, you and I have to first live that message. Because if I'm not living it, how can I expect someone else to understand the message? I haven't even understood the message in the first place. How can I export it to somebody else? And this is why Christians, elders, young, black, gave their life for Hussain ibn Ali on the 10th of Muharram. Because it was a universal message. Because it meant something to them. John, Wahab, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Habib ibn Madahir. Individuals who were 60 years old, they were willing to give themselves for these individuals. Wahab on the 10th of Muharram had just become married, yes? His wife, Hania, and his mother, Qamar, they gave their son and their husband willingly for the 10th of Muharram. John gave himself willingly for the 10th of Muharram. When these individuals went out, they came and they fought so bravely. Wahab came towards Aba Abdullah and said, "May I give my soul for you?" He said, "Go, give your soul." The wife of Wahab came and said, "Oh Aba Abdullah, I have two requests for you. That when my husband is killed, that I don't want it, that I am left all alone. I want you to take me within your family. And the second thing is that I want that you guaranteed me that my husband, when Hur al-Ain are being married to him, he doesn't forget me when he enters into paradise. I will give, but I also want my husband back in the days of Jannah." And Imam says, "I give you this guarantee." Wahab goes out and he fights so bravely for Aba Abdullah al-Hussain, dispatching many enemies towards the hellfire. As he turns round, he rides back towards his mother and says, "Oh mother, are you pleased with me?" She responds and says, "No, I will not be pleased until you have given your head for Hussein ibn Ali. Go back into the battlefield." At this point, he is struck to the extent that his hand is cut off, that he falls towards the floor, that they stab him with spears, and eventually one man comes and strikes the head of Wahab off. Then they take his head and throw it towards his mother. His mother takes the head and swings it back in towards the battlefield, saying, "When we have given in the way of Hussein, we do not take back. This is for you." And then, as the wife of Wahab runs in towards the battlefield, she throws herself upon the head of her dear husband and cries out, "Oh Wahab, you have given yourself for Hussein. I will see you inshallah tomorrow in the day of judgment, and we will go together." But it didn't take long for Wahab's wife to have to meet with her beloved. At this point, one of the enemies comes towards her and takes a spear and stabs her in the head. She falls towards the floor. Her blood is coming on the plains of Karbala, and she dies and joins her beloved. Companion after companion gave themselves for Aba Abdullah. Muslim ibn Awsaja goes. He falls towards the floor. Two of his beloveds, Hussein ibn Ali and Habib ibn Madahir, come towards them. They sit down towards Muslim. And they come and they say, "Oh Muslim, we would say to you, if we could only know that if we would have the opportunity to live longer than you, we would take your will and we would do what you had asked us." Muslim looks with his final moments of strength. He looks towards Habib and points towards Hussein ibn Ali. He says, "Oh Habib, my last will is that you look after this man with every ounce of strength that you have. Do not allow anything to happen to him. No arrow should strike him. No sword should be thrust towards him whilst you are still alive." Habib is the beloved of Aba Abdullah. Muslim, I tell you, I will not allow anything to happen towards my beloved Aba Abdullah. They return towards the camp. At this point, it comes towards Salatul Dhuhr. One companion comes towards Hussein ibn Ali and says, "Oh Imam, the time of Salah has come." Imam responds and says, "May Allah raise you with those who establish Salah." They begin their Salah. One enemy from the enemy camp shouts out, "Oh Hussein, do you think that your Salah will be accepted?" Habib responds in a fit of rage, "Oh man, do you think your Salah will be accepted while the son of Fatima's Salah is not accepted? How dare you say such things? Oh Imam, please, I do not want to recite my Salah here. I want to recite my Salah behind Rasulullah. I want to recite in the heavens. Please allow me to go. Oh Habib, please stay with me for a little while longer. You are such a close companion. I can't bear to be without you." He says, "No, please, Master, I beg you, allow me to enter the battlefield. Hussein says, go, I will see you in a few hours. Habib runs into the battlefield, strikes at his enemies. They strike at him, they kill him and send him towards Fatima al-Zahra, towards Rasulullah. At this point, he calls out, alaykum minni salam, accept my final salutation. Imam runs towards his beloved. He sits beside him as he cries out, "Oh Habib, go towards heaven. Indeed, you are so pure, you used to recite the whole Quran in one night." At this point, it is said that one enemy comes towards him. Even though he had died, he comes and severs the head of Habib ibn Mudahir. There is one musibah that is specific to Habib ibn Mudahir. It is said that the enemies hated Habib for being the beloved of Abu Abdullah so much that they tied his head, and every other shuhada, their head was placed upon a spear. Habib ibn Mudahir, his head wasn't placed upon a spear. His head was tied and was dragged upon the floor. The horses would drag it from Karbala to Kufa to Sham. And then as it entered into Kufa, one young boy, only a few years old, maybe 5 or 6 years old, he ran behind this particular head, and he would stop and he would look at it. He would clean it a little bit, and then one man came to it and said, "Who are you and who is this head?" He says, "I am Qasim ibn Habib ibn Mudahir. This is my father. This is my father. Every other head is placed upon the spear, but they are disrespecting my father's head so much. Please, I beg you, give this head to me so that I may give it some ghusl, that I may wash it, that I might place it with the rest of the heads. I can't bear to see this." We are told in Maqtal, the Dhakirin say, the head looked towards his son. "Oh Qasim, why are you focusing on my head? Look towards the head of your master Hussein. Clean the head of my master Hussein. Do not worry about my head." We would say, "Oh Qasim, are you worrying about my head? Sakina is crying for the head of her, for the head of her father. Go and be a consolation to Sakina. Do not worry about me. Do not worry about me." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands and join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Saviour, to allow us to be alongside Him at all times in our life and in our death. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times. Grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, allow us to implement the true mission of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain this year and every year. Ya Allah, allow us to perform his Ziyarat this year and every year. And Ya Allah, in the final moments of our life, as our soul is being taken from us, allow us to die in the love of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad and raise with Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have 2 announcements, inshaAllah. The first one, tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp, inshaAllah, we will have a majlis in English at Matiwala House here on Chapel Road. Inshallah, the topic that we will deliver is the methodology of tawbah, how we ensure our tawbah is accepted. Inshallah, we invite everyone, brothers and sisters and youth, all of us to gather there tomorrow, inshallah, 11:30 a.m. sharp. Thereafter, in the afternoon here at the masjid, inshallah, at 3 p.m., we're having a special youth program, inviting all the youth of the community to come, engage in an open dialogue and question and answer. We look forward to seeing you at both programs, inshallah. May I ask you to honor Habib ibn Mudahir and all the shuhada of Karbala, all the companions, with a loud Sallu ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.